1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Hello, and welcome to the maiden episode of The Author Has Thoughts, my channel dedicated to me rereading my old books and giving a commentary on them. I am the author of 11 books. I believe it's 11. I have to check again. I'm going to do a lot of so just bear with me. I'm just going to kind of roll off this freestyle. But I figured this was a way for me to reread my own work, critique it, because I think every writer needs to go back and re-examine their older work, not only to say, oh my God, this sucks, I'm so much better now, but also to see maybe if there's some things in there that I as an author can learn from, either mistakes or successes, and build on that in the future. I intend to keep writing books and keep publishing them for as long as people read them, and based on how many read my last few, even if they don't. So this is a way for me to go back and really examine my own writing career and my own capabilities, and to kind of give an honest evaluation of the work, as well as maybe illuminate some of the thoughts and ideas I had that may or may not have been all that well articulated. I'm going to kind of make these, it's not really going to be scripted. I'm just going to, take an idea, maybe write some notes down as I read through the books, and then just kind of verbally spew them at you for as long as I can maintain it without sounding like a total jackass. If you happen to like these little videos, give me some comments down below. Maybe do a subscribe if I've got the little button over there, because everybody does this on YouTube. And if I have ads, I don't know if there's going to be ads, but I'm assuming since it's YouTube, there will be ads. Click on an ad or two. Don't just skip them. Maybe you do. Who knows? Hope you enjoy my channel. So with that said, let's get to the first video. This first episode is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to focus on a specific book yet, but we're going to talk about the inspiration for the series, The Stepping Stone Cycle, which is my Cthulhu series. Now, if you've been on the internet for any length of time, you've probably heard of Cthulhu, though you may not exactly know what it is. But Cthulhu is the creation of an author known as H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft lived in the early 1900s till about 1937 is when he died, and he's known for a particular genre of fiction called weird fiction. In some cases, it's also called horror or cosmic horror or weird tales. He wrote for a lot of kind of pulp magazines from that time period. He's a contemporary of another author that you probably have heard of, Robert E. Howard, who was the creator of Conan and Cole, and who incidentally also wrote a few bits of Cthulhu mythology, which again was created by Lovecraft. Now, I am not what you would call the world's most, knowledgeable squidhead. I've not read, a biography of Lovecraft.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
I've not read any of his correspondence or letters or any of his biographical stuff. I've only read the short stories, and I've read a few of them multiple times, mainly as sort of research for the series, but also because I like them. So I'm not gonna sit there and throw tons of Lovecraft trivia and things like that out at you, or be able to tell you the list of all the elder gods or any of that. I know a little bit, but most of what I know has either come from reading the stories themselves, or when we're talking about Lovecraft and his life, the Wikipedia page, and I'll link the Wikipedia page down here somewhere, so that you can read it for yourself if you'd like. But mainly Lovecraft. Some of the things that people know about him is that he never really made a lot of money from his writing, even though he wrote very prolifically for these weird tale publications. But he also suffered a lot of ailments through the years, and he finally died of apparently cancer in 1937, as I said. But he also suffered from what they call night terrors, which is when your body can't quite get to sleep, but you have extremely vivid dreams. And if you've ever had one of those dreams where you're asleep, you're definitely asleep, but you feel like you're awake, but you can't really wake up all the way, and yet the dream is around you and kind of crowding over you and holding you down like somebody's holding you down. You can't just quite get out of it. That was night terrors. Well, this dude apparently had that often. And if you've read any of his books or know about any of his creations, if dude was seeing that stuff while he was asleep and couldn't wake up from it, man, I'm pretty sure he woke up with sore drawers every morning, because there's some really whacked out stuff. But most of Lovecraft's work fits into what was later deemed, and I'm not sure if he called it this or if some of his contemporaries, like I think Derleth, called it the Cthulhu Mythos. And it's based off the short story he did in, I believe, 1927, Call of Cthulhu. Now, Cthulhu is an otherworldly entity that looks like the physical manifestations of it. They say he looks like a giant body of a man, but with a squid for the head, with tentacles and all this kind of stuff. And to even see him in the flesh would be to invite madness. And in fact, a lot of the elder gods and the other cosmic entities that the characters in the books run up against are so otherworldly and so alien and so terrifying that just to see them causes madness. And so a lot of his characters, there's a lot of madness and insanity, and kind of the overarching theme of most of his work is that, rather like with normal horror, what we tend to think of as horror is we think of supernatural beasties, preying on humans, or we think of, slasher films and gore where people are, dismembered and murdered in some of the worst ways. And there's some of that in it. But, being that he was writing at the time he was writing, it's not like you're going to get graphic, gory details. It's not that kind of horror. But cosmic horror is kind of what it's called at, because he saw the universe as a place where humans were not the predominant species in the galaxy, in the universe, and the things that were not human, the aliens, the otherworldly, other dimensional entities, cared nothing for humanity. It was, instead of I'm going to kill you because you're human, it was I'm just going to kill you because. And the universe had no rhyme or reason to it. It was just one big chaotic fuckfest of your brains being eaten out by these otherworldly gods, other gods. Some of the gods mentioned, they always have very, very strange names. Yog-Sothoth, Cthulhu, Dagon is one. You may have heard of Dagon from some other stories or movies. Azathoth, I think, is how you pronounce it. And a lot of these are very hard to pronounce, so if I get them wrong, you can comment on it, but I know I've got it wrong. I'm okay with that. Again, my knowledge of the minutiae of Lovecraftian mythos, not very deep. Deep enough, I think, to write some stories, but not deep enough where I can sit there and discuss, the pantheon of gods. And a lot of the Cthulhu Mythos, strangely enough, most of it was written by Lovecraft, but after he passed, other authors came in and they've added their own little mix to it, even to modern day. And so, I mean, you may there may be stuff that Lovecraft had no idea about, but that is listed in the Lovecraftian myths. So as I said, I'm never what you would call a super fan of Lovecraft. As a matter of fact, I didn't even read his stuff until my 30s, I guess. Didn't even know who he was until I was in college. And I'll tell you that story in a minute. And one thing I will say about Lovecraft is and I may get some flack for this from people who are really big fans. I don't think as a writer, as a nuts and bolts, these are the words and this is how you put the words together, I don't think he was a great writer in that respect. Which is fine, because there's plenty of authors I love to read that I don't think are great, nuts and bolts writers, including authors who have informed my own work, especially my cyberpunk work. But I think where Lovecraft really shines is the ideas. Is the man had, and maybe it's because of the night terrors that he had these visions, or maybe it's just because the dude was whacked. But he has these fantastic ideas about how to build the dread of how humans would respond to these things that they have their minds aren't even able to comprehend without driving you to pure insanity. My first experience, or my first knowledge of Lovecraft actually came through two things: video games and a crush I had on a girl in college. Now, it was a terrible unrequited crush, and it was doomed from the beginning, and nothing really ever happened with it. But this girl that I hung around with in college, we were working on some comic book stuff together. I was going to start self-publishing my own comic, and she was going to contribute some of that stuff to it. I was working at this was when I was in college at Belhaven College as an art major, but I was working in an electronics boutique. Which, if for those younger kids that might be seeing this, that's what GameStop used to be. I worked there for a few years in the mall when people went to malls. We sold computer games, video games, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Nintendo. It was that era. Yeah, I'm that old. But there was one game in particular that is relevant to this, named Alone in the Dark. Now, there's been a number of sequels and attempts to reboot this series, and I don't think they've ever really worked out completely. But at the time that the first one came out, and man, look at those graphics. Aren't those adorable? Aren't they just beautiful? But this was a 3D survival horror game, and I'll have to check my Wikipedia. I'll have to check, and see. But I think this might be one of the first survival horror games. I think it predated Resident Evil and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, this is kind of one of the first ones out there. Certainly one of the first ones I remember playing. So this game, you can see here, and it's, I guess it's your typical survival horror and kind of Cthulhu based. If you've ever played the game Eternal Darkness, which is also a Cthulhu based video game, it's kind of got the same feel as that, in that your character is I think a detective coming to this mansion for somebody's inheritance, or to investigate a disappearance or death, something like that. It's that kind of setup. And as you go through the mansion, you discover the shit's gone crazy. There's monsters that come out, and Venus flytraps that walk along and fight your head. And again, this is all blocky graphics and all that. It's a fun game, and it really kind of sparked my imagination. I was like, man, this is fun. And it's one of the few games I got close to finishing. I didn't exactly finish it because the last fight was pretty tough. At one point, this girl and I that we were going to hang out one night, but I wanted to show her the game. I thought it was pretty cool. And so I showed her the game, and she goes, "Oh, well, that's Cthulhu, Lovecraft stuff." I was like, "What Lovecraft? What are you talking about?" Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, author. It's Cthulhu, this big monster thing. And she I'll never forget, she told me, tried to explaining what Cthulhu was, and she said that Cthulhu was the author being afraid of this giant cosmic vagina.
What?
Now, if you've ever seen pictures of Cthulhu, I'm not quite sure cosmic vagina is, where I'm totally, that's not the association I make, but that was apparently the association she made. So, okay, let's face it, she was a weird chick. She's great. She was. I credit her as having an important effect on my college years life because she had been exposed to things that I had not, as a suburban, uh, conservative sort of Christian, raised middle class family in the South. White, typical suburban white boy. She exposed me to a lot of different things I had not known about before. One of those being Lovecraft. And I didn't really get into it at the time. I didn't go look for, but this was technically before the internet. I couldn't go to Wikipedia. There was no Google. So I didn't really get exposed to it until later on. But what's funny is, as much as Lovecraft has influenced horror from the time of his death onwards, I actually had been exposed to it and just didn't know it. When I was in high school, 10th grade, I picked up Pet Sematary by Stephen King. First Stephen King book I'd ever read. I had seen some of the movies of his books, but had never read the book, and I was just enthralled because I loved it. I thought it was great. And he was very influenced by Lovecraft. His most famous work, which they just released a movie on it last year that was really good. I recommend it. It has a lot of influence from Lovecraft. The big great turtle, which I've somehow forgotten since it's been so long since I read the book, but the turtle and Pennywise, what his actual form is. But he was very influenced by Lovecraft, and so in a way I just didn't know it. But so that was my first exposure to H.P. Lovecraft and his stuff. And I've since read, like I said, all the short stories. And two of my favorites, believe it or not Call of Cthulhu, although Call of Cthulhu is fine. It's a decent one. And it's the one that, oddly enough, has, given the name to his works as an oeuvre. It's not his best. I mean, some of his best and some of my favorites are At the Mountains of Madness, which is a fantastic story, but I think my all-time favorite has probably got to be Shadow Out of Time. If you read, all of the Stepping Stone cycle, you'll probably see a lot of parts of that shoved in there, but also a lot of parts of Call of Cthulhu, because again, the Stepping Stone cycle is an actual Cthulhu story. Cthulhu is the overarching evil in the story, but you'll also see hints of Mountains of Madness and little hints of little bits and pieces here and there. Just to give you an overview of what the Stepping Stone cycle is. It is a 6-part series of novellas, with each novella being written as if it was the script for an episode of television. Now, it's written in normal prose. The narrative arc of each novella is meant to be like the narrative arc of a 1 or 2 part television episode, something like X-Files, which I was a big fan of. And as a result of that concept, I have taken the first episode and done a screenplay of that. You want a new series? HBO, Netflix? It was written with the idea of making this a television series, and each novella being 1 or 2 episodes in a continuing series, and they'd be connected. The first episode is called First Stone. I know, not very original. But first episode's called First Stone, only available as a 99-cent ebook. Links below. Buy the book. H.P. Lovecraft. Crazy motherfucker. But really, really interesting. If you have not read any of his books, I'm going to link you to the Wikipedia page down below, and I'll probably link you to some compilations of his works on Amazon. Some stuff I've read that'll have stuff if you're interested. We'll see how my schedule goes with these, but I'm going to try to release at least 1 or 2 a month, maybe quicker. Depends on how quickly I read. I read real slow, so you never know how long it's going to take. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do, give a like, do a subscribe. Should be some more videos. And if you do like it, give me some comments as well. Nazis not welcome. Everybody else, you're good. But I hope you come back to see the next videos and enjoy. Hello, Hello and welcome again to Letter. There's no letters. Why am I saying letters?